today. My name is Celia Hamilton, and I'm the conference producer for Data Informs Marketing, Analytics, and Customer Engagement Conference. With me today is one of the conference speakers, Shep Parke. Shep is Managing Principal of Markets and Strategy at Growth Operations Principles. Shep, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Celia, thank you for the time.
Of course. It seems like transaction data is kind of the original data source. We've had a lot of invoices and records and payment data before this term big data came around, and certainly before the importance of interaction data from social media gained steam. So my question is transaction data more important than interaction data, or is it dangerous to think of one data source as more important than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question, Celia. In today's big data world and all the noise around that, I'll answer your question very directly that yes, our experience, frankly, over 20 years is that transaction data is more valuable than interaction data. And I know that can be provocative. We've got a number of examples, and I'll be sharing those when we get together in Philadelphia. A couple of quick examples, and probably one of the more powerful ones that I experienced back, everyone knows where they were 9/11, right? When the towers came down. And we were helping to build a next generation risk data engine in South Florida. And that evening, as we watched the tower replays as they came down on the news for the rest of the night, we found 8 of the 12 terrorists in a transaction data set that we built that had amassed all of the transactions that the terrorists had been, basically doing in the year and a half leading up to the event. So, that's a very sensational and provocative example.
Yeah.
Or tactically in the financial services sector last year, we created a set of services that leveraged how people actually use their banking accounts. Literally, not bill pay. People think that what they're buying is really indicative or predictive on how they may need banking services, and it's not. So, 2 very clear examples in the banking one. It's how people use their actual bank accounts. The transactions there are 4 to 5 times as predictive as to what the next banking service they're going to need. So there's a whole series of examples that from a commercial perspective, transaction data is much more important, and from a, protect the country, transaction data was extremely important.
Wow, those are really powerful examples. In the abstract for your MACE session, the Marketing, Analytics, and Customer Engagement Conference, you talk about how traditional approaches to sourcing transaction data can be hard to use, or they can make the data hard to use. What's one of the newer techniques that you're going to discuss that lets companies get better insight into their core transaction data?
It's fascinating. Again, a great question. You step back from the technique is important, but it's also a mindset. Our experience, I guess, am both blessed and challenged by almost 30 years helping very, very large companies spend an awful lot of time and money on data infrastructure. Some call it data warehousing, some call it enterprise data management. I've been through many journeys with some of the largest companies in the world, and frankly, that whole approach to standardizing, then building very specific data management processes that are not purpose-specific has created a huge amount of cost and complexity inside of most of the companies that we work with. So netting it out, it's really back to the future as far as I'm concerned, and our clients are concerned. We unfortunately have built up an awful lot of complexity, in what we call the data supply chain. What's critical as businesses look to grow moving forward, especially now that big data is both noisy and there's certainly a lot more data that we can take advantage of today. And the good news is that there are ways to simplify how you both think about and then go get only the data that's needed. what's not needed right now, and still I feel many of our clients, and we get brought in, when they realize that it is taking so long to do things like define master data, do things like establish data governance, do things like build specific data extracts out of transaction systems, which then have to be, maintained and updated. These are all examples of interesting but unproductive complexity, in the core processes and businesses. And so from a technique perspective, one of the simple things that we've done, and we'll share more about that again when we get together in Philadelphia, is how to break through that complexity and how to go after, again, just the source data that's needed where it lies. And so the complexity shifts from one of technical complexity to one of leadership and decision-making flexibility. Frankly, the biggest challenges that our clients face often is understanding that senior leaders need to and can make the decision to allow access to data where it lies, so that you can simplify how you go get it.
And then my last question, on your company's website, you discuss having a roadmap to provide strategic insight into customer experiences. Obviously, a roadmap would ultimately have to be tailored to a company's specific needs, but can you share some main points along a roadmap that provide the most value?
Yeah, the roadmap, and a roadmap can start, and again, I think I shared, I've got years both blessed and challenged by years of being a consultant, so roadmap can be a bit consultant. What it really means is there is a structured approach to shifting from sort of project-based approaches to business intelligence to applied learning. And so a roadmap really deals with three fundamental capabilities. The first I started to outline in answer to the second question, which is, you really need to step back from the traditional way that data is managed within an enterprise, and rethink and make it more open and make it more accessible. And that can be done. That's a whole technique set that really begins with the management mindset. Now, you don't do that broadly across the business. Probably the most important part of a strategic roadmap is to clearly and simply identify and prioritize those growth questions that mean the most to the business today. And not all, but the most important ones. So, for example, we just spent last week in South Florida again with the leading energy and utility companies here in this country. And they, as you may know, invest billions each year in modernizing infrastructure. Smart grid is a familiar term. They're generating a huge amount of data. However, for the last 50 years, the most important questions that they need to answer, they're now having to re-ask and re-answer. How quickly, how long does it take for new customers to get activated on their service? How long does it take for the new bills to actually arrive? How many of the bills get returned every month? How many customers are very unhappy with their inability to work seamlessly across different interaction channels? So those are simple questions, right? And they've been in that industry for many, many years. Unfortunately, I think somewhat around big data, somewhat around sort of analytics, there's a lot of hype there. A lot of clients lose track of what the most important questions are to ask and answer. And when you center on those questions, you then, and also step back from, let's be less concerned about building centralized data, be more aware of where the core data is that is needed to answer this question. You can then move into the third part of the roadmap, which is to actually deploy first purpose-based teams, teams that are good at going and getting the data, right? And then those that are able to visualize it and apply it operationally. So, three pieces that really stays centered on core questions that drive growth in the business. But it's a rethink and then a capability set that gets deployed, and it does take, it will take, a year or so to learn and apply these approaches, and we'll share more when we're together in Philadelphia.
That's great. Well, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions today. You've given us some really great information.
Thank you, Celia. It's a pleasure.
And for our listeners, you can read Shep's session abstract, that's a tongue twister, along with the rest of the agenda for the Marketing Analytics and Customer Engagement Conference at data-informed-mace.com. That's M-A-C-E, MACE. The conference is June 24th to 25th in Philadelphia and was created to provide marketing, sales, and customer support managers with the information they need to create an effective data-driven customer strategy. We just announced a new keynote for the conference. Marketing strategist and best-selling author David Meerman Scott will present on how to instantly engage your market, connect with customers, and create products to grow your business now. Check out data-informed-mace.com from the session abstract, and I'll see you in June.